My name is Heather Poltz. I work with Marianne at Chelan County PUD. I am an asset management analyst in our generation and transmission group. And however, we basically are just focused on the hydro assets, my area of expertise here, which is why it's pretty much all I'll be talking about today in terms of the specific asset records. So we do use our CMMS Maximo for other assets. Just briefly about me, I have been at the PUD here for 5 years now. 2 of those have been in generation asset management. I don't actually have like a big asset management background. I actually have a bachelor's in political science, and I worked at law firms for the majority of my past experience. If anyone here has gone through the Institute of Asset Management certification program, however, it teaches that asset management's mascot is a platypus, and that's to convey that successful asset management relies on an unlikely range of skill sets coming together. And the platypus kind of represents that because it's got a duckbill, a beaver tail, and it's furry, but it's also venomous, yet an aquatic mammal. So it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it just kind of works. So despite my background, I am very much interested in data accuracy, process improvements, and creating systematic approaches to solving problems. I was one of the first people at my organization to begin learning and using Power BI, and I've been using it pretty consistently for about 4 years now. I've found that creating dashboards has been a challenging but effective way to share asset data within my organization, and it's certainly helped contribute to increasing data-driven decision making. I think I might have double clicked here. Hopefully this is the second slide here showing for you all. Just a quick overview of Chelan County PUD to give you an idea of who we are and where we are. We are located in almost the middle of Washington State. It's considered Eastern Washington because it's on the east side of the mountains. We have a county population of about 80,000. We provide electricity to about 50,000. We have 31 generating units generating hydroelectric power across 3 dams with a total capacity of about 2,000 megawatts. Fun fact that I learned kind of recently, Rock Island Dam was the first powerhouse. We have 2 at that dam, was the first one on the Columbia River and started up in 1933. So just a brief history of how we've been using Maximo here at Chelan PUD. We swapped over to it in 1998. We currently have 8,200, give or take, operating hydro assets in our generation asset hierarchy. And I took a little screenshot of that off to the side. I honestly don't know what anyone else's use of Maximo looks like. So when I say asset hierarchy, I just kind of wanted to give some context for what I'm talking about here. And we get very detailed. It's just, these in the blue there, those are the assets, and they just keep cascading down and down until we get to the level of granularity that we've decided makes the most sense here at the PUD. So these assets, they're managed by 2 FTEs, that's me and my supervisor, though we rely very heavily on hydro plant planners and engineers and project managers and contractors. So our job requires a whole lot of collaboration with other folks to collect our asset data and make sure it's accurate. We've expanded our use of Maximo in recent years to help us better track hydro data. We have introduced customized fields such as a strategy field, expected life, a warranty expiration date, something we call non-catalog spare parts on the spare parts tab in the asset module, which basically is tracking information about spares, but not spares that we actually keep on hand. So just kind of breadcrumbs to say, oh, if I need this certain type of O-ring, but it's not one we carry, this is what it is, and this is where maybe we've gotten it in the past. Assessments such as condition assessments and criticality scores are now uploaded into Maximo. And we also have a specifications tab on the assets, which is a customized set of attributes for a specific asset type. And it can range from just a handful to, I think I've seen our biggest set is about 39 attributes. Just want to go over a few generalized benefits of using dashboards that I've found. Most of this presentation is very much from my own perspective. I don't have a certification in dashboards, so to speak, but I feel like I've learned quite a bit through my years of using it. One thing that I've found is really helpful with dashboards is it gives a really clear-cut way to identify trends in data. And also on the other side of that, it helps to identify outliers and where you might have issues with your data, which the dashboard that I'm going to present here shortly is kind of the main goal of that one is to show where we have gaps in our data and how we might go about filling them. Dashboards also increase data accessibility and ease of use. So while some of us might be very familiar with Maximo and understand it and all of its quirks and intricacies, other folks here at Chelan PUD, there's about 850 of us, might not use Maximo regularly and might be very confused by how to query, as Steve just was pointing out to us in the last presentation. And lastly, dashboards can also help you bring together data in a format that makes sense to the people who are using the dashboard. It makes it possible to combine data from lots of different sources to help paint that full picture of your data, and in this case, or surrounding a particular asset. And I have just a couple of screenshots of two dashboards here that I've made. One of them is kind of still in the pilot mode, but just to give you examples of kind of when I put them together, I feel like there's a lot of artistry and creativity involved in the design of your dashboards, and just kind of showing you how my brain, when I think of a dashboard, this is kind of what I try to do is I bring in different types of visuals and have complementary colors, and I'll go more into how I make those decisions later on here. So this is a screenshot of the dashboard here on the right that I will be showing here shortly. And just some context for it is we've known that we've had an issue with getting certain important fields filled out for each asset, but we didn't really have a way to quantify it. We just kind of know, oh yeah, we see that one blank kind of a lot. And I had the idea in talking to our business intelligence and data analytics group to go ahead and put some metrics around it. Because once you do that, you can start figuring out how to tackle the issue. So it inspired my boss and I to sit down and think about, okay, Maximo has a lot of fields. There's a lot of out of the box fields. There's some customized fields we've added over time, over the past 27 years we've been using Maximo, that some are still important to us and some of them we've moved away from. And so the average person isn't going to go into an asset record in Maximo and know which ones we're still using, which ones are important. So we sat down and defined about 13 fields that we identified as the most important, and started just tracking how many of those assets have those fields filled out and which ones don't. So this dashboard isn't telling us if the data is accurate right now. It's basically looking for, is it there or not? And so I think a logical next step with this data would be to start doing more of a quality check on the actual data fields and entries themselves, and not just is there data there or not. But this has been a great starting point for us. And so we like to think of Maximo here in Generation Asset Management as our one source of truth. And we say that because we have a lot of engineers and whatnot who in the past have had really intricate, amazing Excel sheets where they've been tracking data, but it's data only they get to look at, and none of the rest of us are aware of or know exists. So having Maximo be the kind of dumping ground for all of our data is our ultimate goal for our assets. And lastly, this dashboard just kind of helped us start a conversation with different groups on, hey, we see this certain field is missing a lot. Well, why do you think that is? What do you think is the best way to get those filled out? And so it started some great conversations with folks and helped us have a good way of learning more about the gaps in this data. So I'm going to cover two main topics when I pull up the dashboard here shortly. First one is going to be design goals, and just quickly I'll run through them and we'll go into them more in a couple minutes here. Big thing for me, as you might have seen from the examples I've shown so far, is consistent colors and formatting, displaying the right amount of information, using the right amount of filtration, incorporating useful tooltips, and ensuring you have straightforward labeling. And secondly, data practices. I hesitate to call them best. That is kind of subjective, but to me, I have identified these subjectively as the most important practices that I've come across thus far as a frequent user of Power BI. a prominently displayed refresh date, quantifying data in ways that are meaningful to your audience, double checking how your dashboard's different features interact, ensuring your dashboard remains focused, which sounds easy in principle, but when you start getting into it, it becomes a bit more of an effort to make sure that you stay on message. And lastly, incorporating feedback and communicating with others about the dashboards. I mean, we're making these for others to utilize and be useful resources and tools for them. So I think it's really important that we keep an open dialogue going. So I am going to stop sharing for a second here and then pull up this dashboard. All right, is this showing up for you all?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Marianne. All right, so going through in a little more detail and showing you this dashboard in real time here. Consistent and easy to look at colors is a really big design principle for me. And what I've done, I'm not a big fan of the default colorway set theme that Power BI loads. I kind of hate the color combination. So what I ended up doing is I created a custom theme. You can go down to customize current theme and change the color palette. And then I just saved off a custom one, and it's a JSON file. And so every time I start in dashboard, my first thing I do is I go and I load my custom theme that has the color choices and the font selections that I already prefer. So I'm not having to reinvent the wheel every time. There are other theme options in here as well, which might be fun to explore. And if you're not interested in using the same sets of colors from dashboard to dashboard. Another thing about colors to consider is conditional formatting around colors. And I just, page 2 here, just show you briefly. So the way I've decided to show this data is via a percentage of completion, and also associating a color with that. So the less percentage that is complete gets a closer to red, and a more complete asset record gets green. So that's a very quick and easy way to, without very much time from the user, to ascertain how complete the asset record is just by the color alone. And another design principle I think about a lot is keeping your font and your font sizes consistent. It's I try to if I make one change in one asset or one visual, I'll go to different visuals and just make sure it's consistent. And one easy way to do that, if you don't want to sit there and fiddle with it a bunch, is to use Format Painter and just click and apply it from the one and click on the other visual, and it'll bring it over, which is really nice, especially when you get into something like a table like this where I have so many little custom formatting uh, things that I've done. And if you want to recreate a table again somewhere else, and you can even do it from dashboard to dashboard. So sometimes I'll have a dashboard that I've spent a lot of time on, and I'll copy that visual into the other dashboard that I'm currently working on and copy the formatting and then get rid of the old one and do it that way as well. And one thing also to keep in mind, and I ran into this recently, is just keep in mind different displays will impact the aesthetic of your dashboards. Uh, if you have a color that looks awesome on your screen, but it's fairly dark, or one that's on the brighter side, just keep in mind that if you go and someone on their own screen, or if you go into a conference room and display it, it might look quite a bit different. So I had one that was a little on the brighter side, and I went and sat down in a conference room with folks, and as soon as I pulled it up on the big screen in that room, it was very bright, like blindingly bright. And so that was just a reminder for me is I tend to try and stick kind of in the middle of color palettes, and maybe give it a little softer, almost a pastel look, just to keep that in mind, and also just kind of make it easier to look at. And my takeaway with a color scheme is an unexciting, kind of boring or a hard to look at interface might lose user interest from the get-go. And we want to make a good first impression to inspire people to stick around and learn more about the story that we're sharing. The next design principle is choosing the right of information on each page in a logical layout. So you can see on this first tab here that I'm kind of try to make the first tab the overview page so it's not too overwhelming. So on the far left, and I think there's actually principles around where people's eyes go first when they're presented with a screen. So starting in the upper left, people tend to look at that first, probably because we read left to right. And so just a quick overview of, okay, the information on the screen is pertaining to 8,259 assets, and then going into some summary percentages around a few of those 13 fields that we identified as important, and then just showing kind of a breakdown of those percentages and seeing that the vast majority of our assets are in the, this is not great. Yeah, we have 8% that are above 75. So the vast majority of them are in the, 20 to 70 percentage range. And you can just quickly see that from this visual. And one discussion we've had quite a bit here at the PUD lately has been asset ownership and assigning ownership and having it be consistent. And what do we do about assets that don't currently have a clear owner? And so that was decided to put on this page, this front page here, just because that is an area that's been getting a lot of visibility. And then, of course, you can, part of the benefit of Power BI is being able to click on a specific visual and have it interact with your other visuals. As you can see here, it shows us that we've got 650 assets between 70 and 80% complete, and then starts giving more breakdowns based on that paring down. And one design principle that I have as well is, again, with starting with your first tab being about an overview of the data, is not wanting to overwhelm them, just kind of dip their toe in the water first, so to speak. And lastly, when it comes to formatting a certain page, a phrase that I also use a lot in my personal life is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just because you might be able to squeeze these visuals down and make font sizes smaller and shove another visual in here doesn't mean you should. If it starts looking really busy and just overwhelming amount of data, you might actually be detracting from your message. Third design principle is determining the level of filtration and asking yourself what level of granularity with your data set makes the most sense. So you'll see here, and this is a consistent theme I have across all my dashboards, is I'll have a bar of filters at the top. And if I have multiple pages, I'll try to make sure they're within reason, if it makes sense, make sure that this filter bar stays consistent and familiar with the user as they swap between different pages. So really putting a lot of thought into which filters make the most sense to include in your dashboard. So I try to put myself in the shoes of the user and say, okay, we have different plants, so let's make sure they can filter by plant. They can filter by generating unit. What's the asset status? Maybe they want to look up an old asset, an old decommissioned asset, and see how we were doing on assets that are no longer operating. Owner, asset ID, and short description for us, and maybe this applies to other people as well, but when we name our assets, we're very consistent in our Hydra hierarchy. And so it's showing all the text to the left of a colon in an asset name. And so we call that the short description. So you can filter by that as well, which can be useful depending on what you're looking for. And asset strategy is a newer field that we've added in Maximo because we've got a big strategy push here over the next 5 years and beyond, of making sure every asset type belongs to a strategy, and that this strategy document gives us consistent information about, when to do maintenance, when to replace it, just general information about that class of asset. And so because that's been such an important item we've been working on, it made sense for us to go ahead and include it here as a filter option. And another thing to think about is which filters you want the user to be able to play with. So these ones being very visible at the top, and then which ones you might not necessarily want them that they could remove if they wanted, but they probably won't. But and so what level to have it. So you can have your page filters, and you can have your filters sync between your tabs if you'd like, and also having a dashboard level filter here. So for instance, I have this dashboard just in the pared down to hydro Obviously, that's the realm within I work, but at the same time, this dashboard could also become scalable if different groups start becoming interested. We could go ahead and change that to a different asset system very easily, and it's visible here. And of course, you could do this on the back end in your data warehouse as well. But I like sometimes keeping filters visual so that people are aware of what those are and not kind of hiding everything away in the back end. Another thing to consider is you can also do visual level filters, which I believe I've not actually applied very much in here. It looks like I did have a custom measure applied to this particular uh, chart. So, having filters at 3 different levels between page, visual, and just a dashboard level filter, you just want to be considering about how those different filters will interact. And one way you can go ahead, and I do this fairly often, is if there's a particular visual, like if I wanted this total card visual here to be a static number that just showed the total hydro operating assets, I would go into the Format tab and do Edit Interactions. And I could go ahead and tell it like, okay, don't pay attention to if I clicked into this graph down here and I tried to filter it down where I would click this and then it would no longer update that. So you can go ahead and customize how your visuals interact with each other via this Edit Interactions option button. So a takeaway for filters is they're incredibly useful and they are key to the usability of your dashboard, but also try to keep them simplified, but customized to a logical level to where the user um, will be able to filter down as they might want to when they come to your dashboard and are trying to uh, do some level of research or come up with a specific conclusion. Next, design principle, um, including helpful text to guide the user along. So you might see I have some yellow text here at the top, and might not come across super well, but this dashboard is kind of fluid at the moment. These metrics that we've chosen, for instance, 75% data completeness on this card visual is subject to change. If we start getting much higher levels of percentage of completion, then maybe we're going to be more interested in, okay, what's 90% data completeness look like, for instance. And another thing to think about is, so when you are in Power BI, the desktop version, you have to control and click to do an action button. And so on the action buttons where that is required, I will make a note to folks to go ahead and control and click, which if you do hover, it would give you that tooltip, but not everyone's going to understand that. But I will say that if you are in Power BI Service, the hosted online version, you don't actually have to hold control to have action buttons when shortcuts and filters work. And another helpful tooltip I put in here, again, something that's kind of hidden away if you're not super familiar with Power BI, is I've created a drill through function on the second tab here. So each row is a particular asset. So our specifications, I touched briefly on earlier, uh, there's a custom amount depending on what type of asset you're in. So one particular asset could have 5 specifications, another one could have 30. And so this is a weighted percentage based on the percentage of completion of however many of those specifications that particular asset has. And I thought just as I was building this, I was like, maybe if I'm looking at a particular asset, I might be interested in knowing, well, which ones are missing or which ones are complete. So having a tooltip there that says, reminds people that you can right click a row and hit drill through to go ahead and go to the specifications for that particular asset. And so we can see this one had 3%, which implies that, out of those, it's about a third complete, which we can come in here and see that that was exactly correct. And then having a back button so folks can go ahead and return back to where they just were. So the takeaway there being trying to cater to people who have the least amount of Power BI experience who might try to utilize your dashboards. So having helpful little text boxes here and there where it makes sense. And if I start going over on time, please, Marianne, feel free to cut me off. Next on my list of design principles, the last one I'll be going over in regards to design here today is making sure you have clear and consistent word choice in your dashboards. Ensuring that your labeling is easily understandable by your audience. For instance, I have a field here called class, and in the back end, this field is called asset class path code, which is kind of jargony sounding, and you can just as easily convey it and simplify it by just calling it class. Another thing to consider when you're bringing multiple data sources together is you might not always have consistent naming of the same field, and so you might think about just keeping an eye out for that and going through your dashboard and making sure that where you are utilizing that data, you're using the same field name throughout. So for instance, at least in our data warehouse currently, asset ID can also be asset number or asset code. And so I'm fairly certain this particular dashboard I went through and had to double check, and I chose asset ID. Um, as you can see, yeah, it's a pretty, let's see here. I guess, oh yeah, so asset ID. It is a filter at the top there if you wanted to look at just one particular asset. And another principle to keep in mind is just that a well thought out title to your graphics can also give users the context they need to quickly understand your visual. For instance, like just deciding when even naming this dashboard, it's kind of a mouthful, but I wanted it to be very clear what this dashboard, what the purpose behind this dashboard was, and it's specific to hydro data, and we're looking at the level of data completeness. And so in going through and titling tables, just trying to make it make very quick sense to whoever is looking at the dashboard. And the next main topic I will be covering are just my subjective best dashboard practices. And this, depending on your level of experience with data, some of this might be really obvious, but it was something that I learned while I was learning Power BI and also obtaining user feedback about the dashboards themselves. Having an easily just available and readily seen refresh date can lend a lot of confidence to your dashboard. And the one thing to consider is making sure that the refresh date is accurate and foolproof. I ran into a situation once where I found just via online learning and research that you can create a measure in Power BI to go ahead and have a refresh date visual tied to that. And unfortunately, I found out that that refresh date was either tied to like the date you opened the Power BI dashboard, so it would be basically today's date, or it would be it would track when you hit the refresh button, but that didn't mean that the refresh was successful. So I've learned to always make sure that I'm pulling in the refresh date from our data warehouse, that date is reflective of the data actually having been a successful refresh. The next practice is being thoughtful on how you present or quantify your data. And this is, again, putting yourself in the shoes of your user and thinking about what format is most meaningful and accessible to them. So initially, when I started this dashboard, I didn't have percentages in there. And I started realizing saying something like, oh, 6,000 assets, for all this it took a little bit more user thought to figure out the significance of that number, but percentages are universal, easy to understand. So I went ahead and converted those numbers to percentages where it made sense. But then another visual, such as down at the bottom here, is I thought, it would still be relevant to show the count of asset, but also being able to tie it into the percentage. Even something as simple as how many decimal places to show. I have quite a few numbers throughout this dashboard. So, this percentage could very easily have incorporated decimal points and given people a lot more numbers and just, 4 digits to look at instead of 2. And it just doesn't make sense to have it be that granular. So the only place I actually have a dashboard, or sorry, a decimal point rather, is this visual here with our data completeness because it is such a low number. Having a couple of new assets, get some fields filled out might bump it up a tiny bit, and I wanted to be able to track it at that level. So the main goal behind that is just being to minimize the amount of time it takes for a user to understand what they're looking at, and also realizing that not everything needs a label. So a lot of the charts will default to having an X and Y label axis. And for instance, I didn't feel that percentage needed to be spelled out here at the bottom because I have incorporated in the title at the top, for instance. Next recommendation I have is to always double check and QA/QC your dashboards before publishing it or sending it around. Sometimes the filters and all the different interactions and visuals can do unexpected and surprising things, and you wouldn't always be able to find that out until you spend some time and click around and kind of pretend to be a user coming in using it. And at the same time, you know, there's also benefit in having somebody else go through and do that process for you. Just having someone with a different perspective, maybe someone with less familiarity with the data, use it. And I've done that many times, and somebody has found a weird data interaction just because they used it in a way different than I would have thought they would have used it, and found an issue that I was able to then go in and correct. And a lot of those issues can be easily fixed with maybe adding a certain filter into a measure, or showing, like we did earlier, where you have the ability to edit the interactions between your different visuals. My next practice is to try and stay true to the purpose of your dashboard. Consider the complexity of the data you want to present, and then think about your different options on what to do with that complexity. You can add a new page to your dashboard. You could build an entirely new dashboard. What I've done several times. I've created a custom version of a dashboard for a user or a set of users because they had a very specific use, and it was something I was able to pull together fairly quickly for them and just send them their own custom version of the dashboard. Or it might also make sense to have a pretty robust, what I would call a Frankenstein dashboard, where you do have kind of a catch-all of lots of different pieces of data coming together, and it might make sense and suit your purpose. So it's helpful to think about how you want your visuals to tie together, and ask yourself, do they harmonize in such a way to paint the picture that you wanted? It can certainly be tempting to insert a visual that you think is really cool, or you have some extra data that would be really cool to throw in there. But just before you do that, just try to think about the user and think if it actually benefits the message you're trying to communicate. One final point before I wrap up here is having a lot of communication on your dashboard with intentions to improve it. So I do a lot of communicating with my IT group and my business intelligence group about issues and challenges I run into, errors I come across, ideas to how to improve the back end of our data to make dashboard creation a lot more seamless, and asking for feedback from folks. Once you publish a new dashboard, or when you're maybe drafting a dashboard, asking them, is this working well for you? Do you have ideas of how else you'd like to see the data? And receiving those insights and suggestions from users will help increase the usefulness of this tool, and provides a learning opportunity for us as the dashboard creators. So those were my main design recommendations and data practice recommendations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. Excellent information. Thanks for sharing with us. Shannon, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have a few. First one is, what have you found is the best method or avenue for sharing your dashboards with your teams and users in conjunction with Power BI licensing requirement?
That is a great question. So initially, we only had a Power BI desktop, and it wasn't rolled out to everybody. So what I had to do at that time is, if somebody really wanted to look at a dashboard themselves, I would have them reach out to IT and get it installed in their machine, and I would just send them the file in like email or Microsoft Teams. But we've in the past year and a half, we've been increasingly increasing the functionality of the Power BI service, which is hosted on our internal SharePoint. We have a little Power Apps or area where we have all our Microsoft products that have an online cloud version. And so the cloud version of Power BI is great for sharing because you can just send folks a link to it. The only issue to think about with that is sometimes visuals will look a tiny bit different. And so you always want to double check when you upload it into the service that nothing significantly changed. And another thing is the functionality in service. As the person who created the dashboard, you're really limited on edits you can make in there. So basically, every time I want to change it, I have to change it in the desktop version and re-upload it.
Thank you. Next question is, are you providing hyperlinks from the dashboards directly into a specific Maximo record, like a work order?
No, I am not at this time. I haven't, pardon me, starting to lose my voice here. No, I haven't really had a need for that yet at that point. That is a logical, that does sound like that'd be a really great way if somebody had to seize, a blank in a record and they're like, oh, I know what that piece of information is, that they could just maybe click on a row and have it pull up. Um, that is not something I've explored yet. I have tried to do internal links before into our server, and there was a permissions issue where Power BI doesn't let you do an internal server link. So that was something I did try to do, but I didn't try to link it into the actual Maximo record. But that is a great idea and something I think I should look into a little further.
And actually, I can give a little update on that. Kind of handy, we're both here. So I have learned, Heather, that there is a way, and I do have the information. I will send it to you. I just literally learned this week from Dante that it is possible to have a dashboard with Maximo work orders, and you click on the work order and go right into Maximo.
Yeah,
So
I figured that one might be possible because that's not our internal server. It's like our hosted
right. So
software.
there
But
is that
that's great.
possibility.
I'm
Yeah,
glad that someone else has already figured that out because yeah, I think that would be very beneficial.
yeah. So it is possible, I guess, is the bottom line here.
Okay,
Any other
thank you.
questions, Shannon?
Yeah, the next question is, are these dashboards connected to the Maximo transactional database or a different aggregated source?
So I am not super technically inclined in that way, I will say. So we have like an Oracle database. And so what this is mostly pulling from here is from that database, we have folks who have created Power BI semantic models that are talking to that database. And so these data sources here, majority of them, not the custom ones I've created in here for sorting and whatnot, but um, these are semantic models that are looking at our data warehouse, our SQL database behind the scenes. But also that isn't our future state. We are, this little disclaimer I put at the top here, we are transitioning to Fabric, which will change our data backend significantly. And I think I'll have to repoint all of my dashboards once that's done. So I'm not sure what future state, how that will look. But right now, the data is, doing a daily refresh overnight, looking at that, any changes in the Maximo database, and then applying them forward into the dashboard.
Right. All right. Next question is, do you have any tips to what your go-to data models are? Like, are there specific fields you always tie together? For example, if working with a table that has a lot of dates, are there specific date fields that you always use?
Specific date fields, or is that referring to like specific ones in Maximo or just dates in general?
I believe in general. I guess just kind of like your go-to data models. Any tips for?
So I think I do have some internal ones. I'm not sure if they would apply. I will say that when I've worked with dates, I've created a date table because when it comes to relationships between your different data sources coming together, having a neutral date table and having them have that relationship makes the data interactions much more seamless. But one thing that I've done in this, so we have what we call as work subzones is actually these are identifying our specific generating units. So a different certain letter at the front is one particular plant. So A1 and A2 is two generating units at one plant, and so on and so forth. And so I actually ended up creating like a sort table specifically because typically it will want to put C10 right after C1. And so in order to sort that in Power BI, you have to give it a column to look at and sort by. And so my default whenever I create a new dashboard is I add in this custom sort table that I've made within Power BI.
All right.
Okay. Do you want one more question?
Sure, one more quick. We have just
Okay.
one more?
One more, yeah. Have you also compared recent operational dashboards in MAS? Any feedback, shortfalls, or comparison to Power BI?
What, wait, Maz, sorry, is that,
Yeah.
what is
Next version of Maximo. It's our
that?
upgrade.
I have, that is Marianne's area of expertise. I am very much not involved in the upgrade process, so I do not currently have an opinion on that one.
Yeah. And we're just starting our journey and getting our timeline in place, so we don't have any information at this time. Maybe next year's conference. Or reach out in 6 months. We might have more information. Thank you so much, Heather. That was an amazing presentation. We appreciate it.